Good morning. On behalf of the family, thank you all for coming and showing your support for today's service. I'd like to ask anyone who has a cell phone to please shut your cell phone, put it on silent, do something not to disturb the service. And if it does start ringing, I know it's a mistake. All right. Okay, Rabbi Feinstein is going to start with the Kriya with rendering the garment, and then we'll start the service.
We welcome everybody today to this bittersweet occasion, an occasion to honor a very sweet man, but also an occasion to think about the person we will miss very much. We're here to give honor to his life and share all the good things that he did, all the memories, all the education, all the guidance, all the inspiration that he gave us. We're here also, as much as we can, to give some comfort and condolences to the family, for whom this is obviously very difficult, also for the close friends in the audience as well, for whom this is a very difficult time. The Jewish perspective on funerals is that even though we probably know all the stories, even though he has certainly heard all the stories, he was part of them, we share the eulogies to inspire each other. You know, we say, this was a great man, this is what he accomplished, look what you can do now. You know, look how great you can be also. And we also tell the stories because through the stories we realize that a story can live on forever, and we hope that it's condolences and comforts, for the family. So we start with a selection from the Psalms. So we read the well-known Psalm 23. Mizmor David, Adonai roi lo eksar. Binoi stashech yarbitzeni, al me menuchos yenachaleni. Nafshi yeshove v'yancheni v'maglei tzedek leman shemo. Gam ki elech v'kei tzalmavis lo irara ki ata imadi. Shivtecha umishantecha hima yenachamoni. Tarach lefanai shulchan neged tzairai. Dishante v'shemen roshi kosi ravaya. Aktov v'chesed yirdefuni kol yemei chayai. V'shavti v'beis Adonai la'orech yamim. A Psalm of David. God is my shepherd, I shall not lack. In lush meadows he lays me down. Beside tranquil waters he leads me. He restores my soul. He leads me on paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Though I walk in the valley, overshadowed by death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me, in view of my torments. You anointed my head with oil, my cup overflows. May only goodness and kindness pursue me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord for many long days. We also customarily read Psalm 121, which reminds us that God is with us in our comings and our goings, in this world, as well as in the next world. Shir lamalos esei enai elarim va'ayin yavo ezri. Ezri miyim adinai osei shamayim va'aretz. Al yitain lamot raglecha, al yanum shemrecha. Hine lo yanum v'lo yishan shomer Yisrael. Adonai shemrecha, Adonai tzilcha, al yad yaminecha. Yomam hashemesh lo yakeka ve'reach b'layla. Adonai yishmarcha mikol ra, yishmor es nafshecha, Adonai yishmor tzeisecha, uecha mi'ata v'yad olam. A song to the ascents. I raise my eyes to the mountains. From where will my help come? My help is from God, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not allow your foot to falter. Your guardian will not slumber. Behold, he neither slumbers nor sleeps, the guardian of Israel. God is your guardian. God is your shade at your right hand. By day the sun will not harm you, nor the moon by the night. God will protect you from every evil. He will guard your soul. God will guard your departure and your arrival from this time and forever. So usually the rabbi has to be very busy getting all the details of a person's life and getting all the stories, because usually the family is too nervous or too anxious to speak, but not this family here. So they are well prepared to share with you some amazing Sheldon stuff, that you will no doubt be inspired from and enjoy. But my job as the rabbi is just to lay the foundation, for their speakings, by sharing a little bit, the biography and the basics, which are not so basic, from the life of Dr. Sheldon Korman. Sheldon was born in 1937. He was born in the famous Kinsman Jewish neighborhood. He was born to Albert and Belle. His father, Albert, was from the Ukrainian village of Chemirovich, and he came as one of 6 siblings to America at the mere age of 16 years old by himself. He later came with possibly a sister, and then his other siblings followed along shortly afterwards. And after they got a little bit more established in America, they brought along the Zaidi who we call William, to accompany them. And this Zaidi never spoke English. He never became as American as everyone else. But the idea of a Zaidi and what a Zaidi really meant really stuck to Sheldon. And if you notice carefully in the obituary, it doesn't say grandpa. It says Zaidi, Sheldon, when it mentions his grandchildren. His mother, Belle, was born here in America, and she also did not have such an easy life. Her parents died when she was just 3 years old, and she was raised by her cousins, and she had to work in a factory, and life was not very simple for someone growing up as an orphan. When they came to America, their family name was Corner, something we have to work out a little bit, and later on the Corner became the Kormans. So Albert, like a lot of people who were very geschickt and capable, but didn't necessarily go to Case Western University, started out life as a peddler. And in those days, if you were a peddler, you did everything. You schlepped, you bought, you sold. Anything you can make a little, penny off of, you did. But fortunately, Albert was very capable. He spoke no less than 6 languages. And he used this ingenuity and this hard work ethic to create his own furniture store, which became quite famous in the old neighborhood. It was known as Korman Furniture. And today furniture stores are well lit and they're beautiful, and you can walk and just see stuff like IKEA. But it was quite the opposite in the old days. It was dark and busy and big and full, but nevertheless the family was able to make a living. So Sheldon, growing up, it seems like he was a tad bit mischievous. There was a lot of stories, and he was always very enthusiastic about things that he had done, windows he had broken, times he had got into trouble. But he figured it out along the way, and he became a good citizen, shortly after. A few years later, after the Kinsman neighborhood and growing up, the family moved up to Cleveland Heights, and they lived on a street called Bainbridge, which is just up over here. And the 2 brothers followed along a little bit afterwards. And then Sheldon attended the Heights High School, and it was a time where a lot of the family, lots of the cousins were in Cleveland, extended family in Dayton and other places. They'd always be getting together, spending time talking, sharing, playing cards. And the idea of cousins and cousin time, which was so precious in those days, was something that they enjoyed abundantly, and something I wish we had more today. So after high school, he was an intelligent person. He got himself to go to Case University. It was called just Case University in those days. And that in order to pay the tuition, which was a little more reasonable in those days, he had to drive a taxi on his free time. And so he drove the taxi and paid his way through the university, through the undergrad. And at that time, the Vietnam War was brewing, but hadn't quite started yet. And he was able to move on to graduate school. He went to graduate school for dentistry, and he finished, and he's got his degree and everything. And after that, he had a vision, he had a pride, he had a sense of being there for America, and so he wanted to enter into the force. and he wanted to be in the Air Force. And he was able to enlist as a captain because he was already a dentist when he enlisted in the American Air Force. The family had read the book Hawaii by Michener, and it seemed all glorious and glamorous to go to the Big Island, but instead he was stationed in Okinawa, which was quite not the glamour, I guess, that Hawaii was. So, anyways, he never saw combat, but he would have been proud to serve his country in whatever way would have been called upon him. And he was able to return stateside, and he came back to Cleveland, and he was able to start his own practice right away. He had his own dental practice in Twinsburg, and it was truly a family practice. It served families, and it was run by the family, and that was something that really made it really special and made it a very good place to go for your teeth. They ended up buying a location later on in Euclid, and then they got a little bit bigger, and they added some other locations in Garfield Heights a little bit later on. Big things happened for Sheldon that hadn't happened already in 1987, where Sharon and Sheldon found each other. And it was quite a notable shidduch. You know, sometimes to make a shidduch, it requires oceans to be split and big things to happen. And that was indeed the case. And I cannot keep track of all the people involved in the shidduch, but you can ask Sharon later, and you probably won't believe it if she tells you what it took to happen. But it was proof that it was a great sign that it was meant to be. You know, it was a real heaven-sent one. And how often do you get a guy who likes to ride bikes all the time and a gal who likes to run? And they both have perpetual energy. So that was a very important piece of it all, besides the fact that we're both very special, good, and kind, caring people. So that happened in 1987. And, you know, as alluded to, Sheldon was always on the move. In fact, he didn't like taking cars to the office. He liked to ride his bicycle whenever he could. And I politely asked, didn't he put away his bicycle in the winter? And I was told otherwise. And I was even told of a time where Sharon, you know, when they were newly married, you know, saw the weather report wasn't looking so good. It didn't seem like it was a good idea to ride the bike home. She came to pick him up, and he did not want to get a ride home. He had already left, I think, on his bicycle, and who knows how cold it was outside. But anyways, cycling was a big part of his life. You know, he enjoyed, you know, cycling with the guys on Wednesdays when they had off from the dental practice, and of course on the Sundays as well. And a big dream of his came true, you know, when there's the famous Tour de France cycling race, and he was able to do a leg of the tour, not during the tour, but he was able to preview it, and he maybe was able to close his eyes and pretend that he was racing to the finish line. But that was a thing that he always remembered. And it was very special how Sharon and he was able to join him in a lot of those cycling dreams, you know, as well as the extended family. So the two of them were big travelers, and they went all over the world. You know, they saw a lot of, you know, the United Kingdom. They saw a lot of France, Australia, all kinds of places in Canada. But the thing about him is that when the time came to close the practice, he didn't want to slow down. And the amount of volunteering that he did and the amount of things that he tried in his, you know, later years was incredible. You know, so if it wasn't for the notes that I took, I don't think I could remember all these places. But if there's time, I'll mention, I guess, just some of them. He volunteered at the Beechwood Fire Department, and in those days, you could do a little more than maybe today as a volunteer. You know, he had a nice red flasher on his car, which he was all too happy to pull out whenever he could, and he also sometimes would direct traffic, you know, for the fire department. He volunteered to help kids who couldn't pay for dental work to get their teeth done for free, and he did free checkups and cleaning and things like that. And I almost fell off my chair when they said he was an extra in the Cleveland Opera, you know. So on top of all of this, they said I didn't know he had time to learn how to sing opera, but I was told that he was just an extra. You know, he just stood on the stage and looked good, you know. But then just when I was about to recover from the kind of volunteer antics that he got into, I heard that he was a volunteer with the ski patrol. And I figured he made like hot chocolate or something when they came back from the slopes. But it sounds like they gave him a sled and they allowed him to rescue people, which is pretty remarkable. You know, and I can't easily picture it. But then again, a man who's late in years, who likes to go on hikes and probably walks faster than the grandchildren, helped me to picture more what he actually was able to do. He did the community courts where he helped people who had community service. I guess he would tell them where to pick up the trash, and he would try to encourage them not to do it again. He was also a volunteer ranger at the golf course, and he would help people over there. I don't want to take, I don't want to take any stories away, but there's one little story that the family shared about the golf courses, was that one day there was a bunch of people, and I guess, people play golf and take their time, and other people are in a big hurry to get through with it. And so one day there was a group that was in a big hurry that was preceded by a group that wasn't in a hurry. And the group that was in a hurry was getting really antsy and was yelling at the people, to hurry up. And so what did Sheldon say? Sheldon yelled back at the people in a race saying, give them a break, they're having fun, so what, you have to hurry, just let them be, and so that's just the theme of his life. His children, and grandson will share more, but just this is the theme of a life of a man, who was always active and always doing things. He was always loving to be with people in any context, in any form. He was always loving to give and to help and to share and to teach. And that as much as I didn't know him so well, I just know him in the last few days of his life, I think sometimes you really know a person by looking at their children and their grandchildren. So by looking at his children and just seeing how they handle things, how they act, how they conduct themselves, you can really, really see what kind of a person that he was and what kind of imprint he left on the life of the people behind him. And so we say in Jewish tradition, we say L'dor v'dor l'netzach netzachim. We say from generation to generation, from eternity to eternity. So we don't live forever, but if you give each generation a lot of strength, and you give each generation a lot of specialness, and they pass it on from one generation to next generation, you do have eternity. Because the great things that you give over go from one generation to a generation to a generation. And really, in a literal sense, he really is living through his children and his grandchildren, so their good deeds and their good actions, and it should only continue, from strength to strength. At the risk of having said too much, because I said it would just be an introduction and let them speak, I'm going to now call upon his daughter, Amy, who's going to share a few words. Or did I go out of order? Okay. Whoever, Laura's going to go first? Okay, I'm sorry. I'll just come up and we'll figure it out.
My dad used to say, Amy, don't get so emotional. I seem to cry at all the big events, but the truth is, he was emotional too. He had this side of him that was sensitive and so caring. He cared about people. He cared about his patients, his peers, cousins, in-laws, friends of his friends, family, friends of his family, the whole mishpacha. He would even ask his grandkids about their friends that he had met along the way. He was a people person, and his friendships spanned generations. When Laura, Scott, and I were growing up, we would often go as a family to stores like Forest City, Uncle Bill's, and Radio Shack, and my dad would always strike up a conversation with the person behind the counter. It was fun to just watch and listen, as it seemed so easy for him to nonchalantly talk to people that he didn't know. As for his closer ties, the relationships were always deep. His own dad passed at age 56 when he was 17 years old. When my dad reached that age, he would tell us that every day after that was a gift. He lived in gratitude. He was the go-to communicator of family news that had anything to do with any family member. He cherished his brother and sister, Howie and Elaine, and he was devastated when he outlived them, but he carried on. He was also a doer, an enthusiastic doer. On our family ski trips, he made sure that we were up and out early so that we could catch the very first chairlift of the day. Whether he was fixing something or building something, say a sukkah in the backyard, we were all his assistants. He gave his time freely, volunteering in the parks, on the stage, and in the community. As for the biking, my dad literally had more miles on his bicycle than he did on his car. He was also an adventurer. Sometimes the adventures went well, and sometimes they didn't go so well. But he made sure we were part of them all, whether moving dental offices, volunteering on a kibbutz in Israel, waiting in tide pools in California, shoveling snow after a big snowstorm, or breaking down on the highway. With each experience, he and I would look at each other face to face and say, well, that was an experience. When my dad taught me how to drive a stick shift, there we were, stopped at the red light on the steep hill on Richmond Road. The light turned green, and between trying to let out the clutch and step on the gas, I stalled out. Cars were honking all around us, and somehow he got me through it. That was an experience. One of the greatest joys for my dad was becoming a Zeta. There are too many memories to name, but despite our 300 miles apart, he was with us for soccer games, baseball games, basketball games, wrestling matches, birthday parties, festivals, and more. We shared walks in the National Arboretum, Cleveland Metro Parks, and in the cemetery right behind his house. We oohed and ahed at July 4th fireworks together on our annual drives back from Michigania. Both Michael and Riley spent time living in and near Cleveland and created their own memories with Zeta. Well, Dad, this life, this journey, what an experience. Thank you for being who you are, a doer, an adventurer, a people person, a cheerleader, and stubborn as all get out. I know you were listening last week when we held hands, and I know you are listening now, along with Grandma, Howie, Elaine, and the whole mishpacha. I love you so much.
Well, I'm channeling Grandma Bella right now with my tissue tucked in my sleeve, which I've never done before, and it brings me right back. So, when I was little, well, I'm still little, but when I was littler, I think I would get really excited, maybe I was anxious, I don't know, before going on trips. And I just remember I must have been 10, and I don't really remember how it came together, whether I went and woke him up or he was already up, but I was up in the middle of the night. I just couldn't sleep. And next thing I know, we had a reading party, and we made a party of it. So Dad was wonderful that way, and of course inspired me to read a lot. In one of the books I've read recently, I came upon a couple of quotes, and this one, so it's The Covenant of Water by Abraham Verghese. If you haven't read it, you must. And there's a quote from Ecclesiastes, "Whatsoever thy hand findeth to do, do it with thy might, for there is no work, nor device, nor knowledge, nor wisdom in the grave, whither thou goest." And that resonates so much. That's how he lived. Everything was big, no matter how little. And he modeled this life for us with such enthusiasm. In his skiing, oh my gosh, he would take us out of school on Wednesdays, his day off, and we would go to Greek Peak, I don't know, a couple hours away, and take a day off and not tell our teachers and our friends, or maybe we told our friends, but and then we would go after school to the Cleveland Ski Club, often bringing dinners. We started taking trips out west when we were 10, probably the night of the reading party, starting about 4th grade, and those were so much fun, wonderful to look forward to. We went to so many places. And then as we all grew up and had our own kids, we started going to Breckenridge, Scotty's place, and bringing our little kids. And he just loved being out there in the snow, in the forest, and just time with family. And his bicycling, as you know and heard, he lived on his bike. And I remember he's really got into biking sometime when we were in elementary school, and one of our big ski trips, he broke his leg. And he had a full-length cast, which was really debilitating. But once he got down to the below-the-knee cast, he actually got on his bike and was back on his bike riding to work with his half cast on. Our biking, he equipped us all as teenagers with these great road bikes that we had our Schwinn little no speeds, and suddenly had these great bikes. But then he made us go on bike rides, and he took us to the Finley horizontal 100, and we were dying. He made us ride this whole thing, and which was, I guess, in retrospect, inspirational. We didn't think so at the time. But since then, as I've become more of a cyclist, we did a lot more cycling together that was much more appreciated and fun. He came to Arizona when I was living there with my family and did the tour to Tucson. On his little bike Friday, he rode 112 miles on this little foldable, portable bicycle, which was pretty impressive at the time. We did Tazroff together. That's the tour of the Scioto Valley, River Valley, down from Columbus to Portsmouth. It's a 200-mile ride that was always a point of contention in our family growing up because it's always done Mother's Day weekend. But finally, when I was old enough to be a mother, and that was my Mother's Day dream, I got to ride it with him, which was incredibly special. And then I dragged him on Cycle Oregon, which is a 7-day cycling adventure in Oregon, and it's a different route every year. And I was really proud of us. I set us up ahead of time for the tent and porter service, which was a very luxurious opportunity where they set your tent up for you. And I thought, wow, I'm really going to splurge and make it nice and easy for Dad, only to find out he doesn't sleep on the ground. He was in his 70s as a septuagenarian, and I made him sleep on the floor in the tent, which we didn't have to set up at least. Anyway, and a big hiker, which when we were little kids, every Sunday we would go do something, hike in the metro parks, which again was torture as a kid, and now in retrospect it was the best opportunity ever. I can visualize him dancing. He loved a party, all the bat mitzvahs and bar mitzvahs and weddings and things. He was on the dance floor, and in fact we were looking at a dancing video last night where he was rocking out. Anyway, he's always been the most helpful and encouraging, inspiring. I would call him from Oregon when I was a resident when I was in trouble with something, like I couldn't get the car started. And he'd be like, Laura, why are you calling me? I'm in Cleveland. But he would still figure out a way to help me out. And in fact, it was not for him. I would have never gone to med school. He really encouraged me and gave me the confidence. And finally, he loved his girls, not just us girls, but I brought him some granddaughters, which he had been waiting for. He loved his grandsons, but to bring little girls was wonderful. And in fact, when I was pregnant with Avi, we were together at Thanksgiving, and we wished upon the wishbone a wish which we couldn't tell each other. I don't remember who won the actual bone break, but we couldn't tell each other until we knew both of our wishes came true, and I had a little girl. Sorry. Anyway, I want to close on another little quote, also from the same book, that just was beautiful. And that's, to see the miraculous in the ordinary is a more precious gift than prophecy.
When I was a kid, Dad was the dentist of the hockey teams, the minor league Barons, and the Crusaders, and the NHL Barons. So he had tickets, and so we went to a lot of games together. The games ended late for a grammar school kid, and on the way home we would listen to Mystery Theater, or I would just fall asleep on the way home, and those are special times. It gave me a lot of cachet with the kids in my school, too, because they knew they could come to the game, and Dad was able to get us into the locker room. He knew the guards, and he'd just nod to them and go in, and it was pretty cool to go into the locker room and get autographs from the professional skaters or hockey players and stuff, too. He was consistent in his routines. I would tag along with his routine sometimes, like playing golf on Wednesday mornings with his gang, like Danny Schwartz and the optometrist Barry, so I can't remember his first name. I often joined his Thursday lunch crew at the office building deli, or the local Chinese dive with Mel or Schlesinger. Sometimes I would ride to his office at Euclid at the end of the day, and we could ride back together. We had a consistent routine, and Dad of Dad making popcorn after dinner so we could all watch MASH together. He was also a tinker, as my sisters have said. He was always willing to try something new. Our house on Hazelmere in the middle of the burbs had a maple tree, and he had this idea of tapping it so that we could have homemade maple syrup. It was pretty awkward to be the only house sitting in, probably within 5 square miles of tapping a maple tree. But anyway, I do remember a cauldron of sap that he was trying to make this syrup. I don't know if we ever actually ate waffles with Korman syrup, because he probably burned the huge tub, but he tried it. He tinkered with his bike and taught me how to do so. He taught me how to fix things. And this is from Jennifer. Who says I'm a trusty handyman at the home as well. After I left home, I really came to understand how much he loved me. Nothing was a burden for him. When I was in Telluride and started to play golf a lot, he shipped my clothes out to me. And when I was in medical school, he would tape the Browns games on Sunday and mail out the cassette so I could watch it on Wednesday and Thursday at the medical library. The Browns are actually competitive in the 90s, believe it or not. We had an easy relationship, if he got mad at me, I didn't care because I knew he'd get over it. And if I get mad at him, it didn't last because he never got upset back at me. With Sharon, he found tremendous stability, and the last 30-plus years were quite peaceful for him. He loved hearing about things we did. Knowing that we went out skiing was just felt so good for him. He adored his grandchildren without reservation or judgment. He loved coming out to see Maddie's ballet. Every time we talked about her, he was filled with joy, reminded of her graduation picture on his fridge, and say, "She's just so beautiful." He excelled when Sam went to Michigan, such familiar territory for him because Amy and Laura went there, and so close. When he gave his car to Sam, it felt like a capstone event for grandfatherhood for him. A lover of opera and music and theater, he watched Charlie and Sweeney Todd at the Denver Center, and it was just a joy for him. Well, I'll try to pattern from Dad that tranquility that never let problems wait too long. That tranquility is a mentality that has just been good for my soul.
Thank you so much for your words, so beautiful and eloquent and so from the heart. So now I call upon grandson Riley to share a few words. Oh, sorry. Okay.
Hi, I'm not grandson Riley. I'm Eric. You heard about Howie, Shelley's younger brother, and I'm Howie's oldest son. And I just wanted to say a few words about Shelley. My dad, Howie, he was an engineer, and so he's very, matter of fact and wanted things a certain way. And Shelley was a lot like Howie, but the fun version. And so whenever Shelley and Amy, Laurie, and Scott would come to visit, or we would go visit them, it was a party. And oh my gosh, it was so much fun just seeing the way that Shelley would conduct himself, and he always had this twinkle in his eye that was just contagious. And you never knew exactly what he was going to do. And that was something that was so exciting, and his sense of adventure too. There was a time when Shelley and the kids came to visit us in California, and Shelley had the idea of going to a Moroccan restaurant in Palm Springs. And Palm Springs was about a half hour away from where we lived, but we hardly ever went to Palm Springs. And so that was exotic. And we'd never, ever had Moroccan food before. We kind of had a lot of microwave food and spaghetti and noodles and macaroni and cheese, but Moroccan food? So Shelley opened up this world to me that I didn't know existed. And just the idea of traveling and going skiing and hiking and seeing all these places and living so large, Shelley was a role model that I hadn't had like that before. And I ended up traveling the world and doing all kinds of amazing things, but it was because Shelley and Amy, Laura, and Scott inspired me that, wow, the world is a lot bigger than you think it is. And you are capable of doing so much more than you think you can. And for that, I just can't, Shelley, I just can't thank you enough for that. And of course, the amazing family that you've brought into this world, because, my cousins and first cousins once removed, and all the family, I mean, you're like my siblings. I mean, I've told you this before individually, but I mean, I just can't express how grateful I am, to have y'all, and Shelley for making this all possible. Shelley also was very pragmatic. He was kind of a hacker, and he would talk to me about just ways of moving about in the world. And there's one piece of advice that he gave me that I know my wife doesn't like me to use, but I use it anyway. He says, you keep yourself in pretty good shape. Make sure you get out and move and do things. But if you find that you put on a pound or two extra, just skip lunch. Just skip a meal from time to time, and you'll get right back on track where you need to be. And I still use that today, and it actually works, at least for me. So whenever I skip lunch, when I've noticed I put on a pound or two, I think of Shelley, because he just had ways of navigating the world that I always appreciate. And just fun. He'd call in and check on me. Eric, you're doing okay. He always wanted to know, are you okay? And then I'd say, yeah, I'm doing great. And I'd tell him a few things. Good, okay. And then conversation over. He was satisfied. And I had the opportunity a couple of years ago when he came out to California for my nephew Lincoln's bar mitzvah to be his Uber driver. I drove him and Sharon around, and I just relished that opportunity to be able to give back, and help him the way that he had helped me. Just such a wonderful, wonderful human being. And after my dad passed 5 years ago, to be able to spend time with Shelley felt like I was spending time with my dad, Howie. And I just, again, deep gratitude for Shelley. Thank you for all you've done. Thank you for this beautiful, beautiful family that you've created. And I feel so honored to be here.
Thank you so much for your words and your spontaneity, and he sure loved his brothers and brothers' family, that's for sure. So I guess now we'll call upon Riley to share with a few words, unless the family has some more surprises for you.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. I know some of you traveled a long way to be here. We're so glad to see you all. So I'm Riley. I'm one of the grandkids. And Zeta, my cousins and I call him Zeta, today is a celebration of his life. And you've heard much about how he lived, but in his case, it's important to also hear about how he died. Just 1 week ago, my mom, dad, brother, aunt, and I visited Zeta for a final goodbye. We were so fortunate to have that opportunity, and most people don't get that, and it was painful. In many ways, he wasn't himself. He couldn't sit up or eat. He couldn't see or speak. He had mostly lost control of his arms and legs. and he wasn't smiling or laughing. But I've seen family near the end of life before. In fact, I owe that to Zeta. He took me, along with my mom, to visit my great-grandpa Henry on his 100th birthday. It was an unexpectedly profound experience that I couldn't do justice even with twice as much time to speak. Suffice it to say, something I witnessed that day is that though time inevitably unravels us all, there are some qualities, some characteristics that we hold on to harder than life itself. And it's not every time, but sometimes, if we're lucky, we can see that glimmer in our loved ones before the light fades at the end. So what was left of Zeta, as we knew him? Well, we were really lucky because he made it really easy to see. The moment we arrived, we could see him wrestling with his sheets. Yes, his arms were moving largely of their own accord, but when his hand touched his sheets, he would grab and pull to the side. As we know, pushing down means he's hot, pulling up means he's cold, but pulling to the side means the sun is shining, and I've got to throw off my covers and get up because there's things to do. His legs wouldn't have carried him, and he had no obligations left in this life. But there's always another adventure, and he was clearly ready for it, as he was every day of his life. Then, my mom and aunt sat next to him on his bed and started talking. Now, if you've ever talked with them before, you know they're very nice people. But hearing them talk to each other, they're very funny people. There's this feedback loop where they quickly take on a fast, bubbly cadence that unmistakably identifies them, even if, like Zeta, you couldn't make out the words. It was the only time that weekend that the wanton shifting of his arms subsided and gave way to a deliberate reaching across his body to them. Once they took his hand, you could see his grip tighten. And as his arms began to weaken and shift once again, he did not let go. His eyes could no longer show him his children. His mouth could no longer form his last words. But he still found a way to be with his kids and to send his last message, because that strength in his hand was his. And when it was time to go and say our final goodbyes, as I left his bedside and my hand began to slip from his, he gave me that strength too and held me just a little while longer. I'd come all that way to make a final memory with him, but that very last moment was his doing. I am so grateful to have been a part of his life for the past 30 years. Any memory I have of him would only reinforce what you already know. But what I can tell you is that at the end of things, at his core, he was as he has always been. A man who wants to stand on his own 2 feet and hold fast to the people he loves. The world is a better place because of people like him. He is a shining example of what we can be. And his death has not just brought his children here, but all 7 grandchildren dropped what they were doing to come together from across the country. And last night, we stayed up laughing and telling stories of our time with him. It's exactly what he would have wanted. Thank you.
So I'll go back to what I said in the beginning. They didn't really need the rabbis talking. They could have covered it quite well themselves. And so what a beautiful tribute you made to your father and your grandfather Like it had everything. It had history, it had life lessons, it had inspiration, it had insights, and a lot of quotes and literary things to contemplate. One slight idea, if I could somehow sum it up, what they said, in closing, is that we all worry about life insurance. We want to get our family life insurance. It costs a lot. How much do you get? What kind of coverage do you get? But sometimes the best kind of life insurance is the kind of life insurance that Shelley gave his family. You go through life and you teach them, you guide them, you plant seeds about what you should do when this comes your way, when you can't call me and ask me for help. So you guys have a very good life insurance policy. So let me know how much it costs. I'd like to buy one too. So we pray together that his memory should always be for a blessing. So immediately following the services, we're going to go in procession to the Mount Olive Cemetery. There's a rumor that you have to ride a bicycle to the cemetery, but it's simply not true. I didn't see any bicycles outside, but if you have one, we will tolerate it, and we won't give you a lecture about the weather not being appropriate. But we're going to be making the committal service at Mount Olive in procession, and then we're going to, following services today, between 3 and 5, there's going to be a gathering at the family home, at Sheldon Korman's home, 356 Thistle Trail in Mayfield Heights, from 3 to 5, and then from 7 to 9 p.m. And then there's going to also be on Tuesday, there's going to be from 4 to 6? 2 to 4, also Shiva hours as well. If you would like to make any donations, there's information about donations, I believe, over here in the pamphlet. Now what we're going to do now is we're going to please rise, and we're going to say the memorial prayer. And upon the completion of the memorial prayer, we'll have the grandchildren, the pallbearers, come forward. And our custom is that the casket is led out the back door first. The pallbearers lead the casket, and then the family follows behind the pallbearers, and then everyone else from the audience files in behind the family and goes through the back doors towards their cars. El Mali Rachamim, Sheichein Bamromim, Hamsei Menucha Nechain Al Kanfei Hashchina, V'Malois Kedoshim Utahirim Kazerakia Mazhirim Es Nishmas, Shalom Ben Abba Shahalach Leilamo, Bavur Shem Anachtem Mispalin Bahazkaras Nishmaso, V'Gan Eidin Te Menucha So Lechein Bal Harachamim, Yastirechu B'Seisa Kanafav Le'olamim, B'Yitzor B'Tzar Chayim Es Nishmaso, Adonai Hu Nachlaso, V'Yanuach B'Shalom Al Mishkavo, V'Nomar Amen. O God, full of mercy, who dwells on high, grant proper rest on the wings of the divine presence, in the lofty levels of the holy and the pure ones who shine like the glow of the firmament, for the soul of our most beloved Shalom, the son of Abba, who has gone into his place and gone into his rest, for whom we pray. May his resting place be in the Garden of Eden, and may the Master of Mercy shelter him in the shelter of his wings for all eternity, and may he bind his soul in the bonds of eternal life. God is his heritage, and may he repose in peace on his resting place. And we say together, Amen. So if now we're going to remain standing, the pallbearers will come forward, and we will lead the casket out.
Charlie with an I. Her name is Charlie Socks. Her name is Charlie Socks. I guess she has white feet.
This is my wife. She works at Trader Joe's as well.
Hi.
Rob Meisel.
Rob Alshbeta. Nice to meet you.
What's your first name?
Alshbeta.
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 Okay, that's unique.
It's Slovak. It's Slovak. Yeah.
So she's in the morning. She works in the mornings. You'll see me in the afternoons.
I've never seen you at Trader Joe's, but that's because I usually don't get there in the mornings. But Steve,
I leave at 2 p.m. So that's why I'm not there. I get there at 6 in the morning. So
Steve, I've gotten to know just shopping there regularly.
Yeah.
As a very friendly, personable guy.
yeah, it's one of the reasons why I married him.
Yeah. So you bike for Sheldon and all that?
So we met volunteering together with the Cleveland Metro Parks and the Trail Ambassadors.
Nice. Community thing calm.
You can either ride like during the shift or hike. I mean, we actually did both depending on our mood, but the first time was biking. And this day I still remember riding up to his bike, coming up from behind him, and this little plate on the back saying Zeta.
Oh, really?
So then,
Okay.
and it was funny because I didn't know for sure. I didn't know, ahead of time. I knew his name, and that's all I knew. And it's like, oh, obviously he's Jewish.
You are.
And we turned out riding the bike that particular shift. We had a great conversation. And it turned out there were some other things we had in common. He started telling my daughter Amy and how she went to Hawken, and I said, I know your daughter. We were in the same class.
Oh, wow.
And I quickly learned about Shelley's stubbornness because it took me about 5 minutes to persuade him that she and I graduated the same year and not a year apart.
Hi, Bonnie.
But,
Yeah.
and then he knew of my father as well.
Oh, wonderful.
From actually through his former father-in-law, he knew about my dad.
Yeah.
So that was neat.
It's a small world. Cleveland is a small world.
Yeah, as my mom used to like to say, especially such a thing as Jewish geography.
There's that.